today's video, we're looking at the most horrifying Bigfoot encounters caught on camera, from 7 officers who vanished after filming coordinated attacks to a Sherpa guide who photographed a 10-foot creature in the Himalayas. On January 11, 2025, 7 law enforcement officers from the Skamania County Sheriff's Department entered the remote wilderness of Gifford-Pinchot National Forest on what appeared to be a routine wildlife investigation. At 2:15 p.m. on that overcast winter afternoon, Sergeant Mike Torres led his tactical response team into the forest's depths. The unit consisted of seasoned deputies Jackson, Williams, Lee, Rodriguez, and Murphy, alongside rookie officer Sarah Blake. Their mission seemed straightforward: investigate a series of aggressive wildlife attacks that had terrorized campers over the previous month. 3 separate incidents had been reported, each involving what witnesses described as unusually aggressive primate behavior during nighttime hours. The attacks had escalated in violence, with the most recent leaving 2 campers hospitalized and 1 missing entirely. At first, local wildlife officials theorized the behavior could be linked to displaced black bears or escaped macaques from a private collection, species known for defensive aggression and territorial displays when threatened or competing for scarce winter food source. The team arrived equipped with standard tactical gear, body cameras, and radio communication systems. Their vehicles navigated the treacherous logging roads that snaked through the snow-covered terrain, reaching the reported attack site as the first flakes of an early winter storm began to fall. What the officers discovered at the campsite defied conventional explanation. A recreational vehicle lay overturned, its metal frame twisted and punctured by what appeared to be massive claws or hands. Personal belongings were scattered across a wide radius, suggesting a struggle of extraordinary violence. Most disturbing were the tracks preserved in the fresh snow. The footprints measured over 18 inches in length, clearly bipedal, with a stride length that suggested a creature of immense size and strength. Sergeant Torres, a 20-year veteran with extensive experience in wildlife encounters, immediately recognized that these prints matched no known animal he knew. Body camera footage from this initial phase shows the officers methodically documenting the scene, their professional demeanor gradually giving way to unease as the implications of their findings became clear. Radio communications with dispatch revealed Torres's growing concern as he reported the unusual evidence, requesting additional resources and wildlife experts. The surviving camper, still hospitalized from his injuries, had provided a chilling account of the attack. He described being awakened by his companion's screams, then witnessing a massive, hair-covered figure dragging the victim into the darkness. The creature's intelligence was what haunted him most: the deliberate, almost human-like way it had disabled their vehicle and eliminated escape routes before attacking. At 3:45 p.m., the investigation took a sudden turn. Deputy Lee's body camera recorded a disturbance in the tree line, roughly 200 yards out, branches shifting, brush parting, and a large, indistinct mass moving low and fast between the trees. The form never fully emerged, but the motion carried a weight and deliberation that none of them could explain. Audio recordings from this period reveal low, resonant calls echoing through the forest, vocalizations unlike any known wildlife in the region. The officers reported an oppressive silence that had fallen over the area, with normal forest sounds completely absent. Even experienced outdoorsmen among the team noted this as highly unusual behavior for the local ecosystem. Torres made the tactical decision to regroup his team, recognizing they were potentially dealing with an unknown and dangerous threat. However, their radio communications had become increasingly unreliable, with GPS units malfunctioning and electronic equipment experiencing unexplained interference. Officer Blake's camera captured the first clear sighting at 4:10 p.m. The footage shows a massive figure, estimated at 8 to 9 feet in height, standing motionless on a distant ridgeline. The creature appeared to be covered in dark, matted hair. Most unsettling was its apparent lack of fear. This was not the behavior of a wild animal encountering humans. When Deputy Murphy attempted to approach for closer documentation, the situation escalated rapidly. What they had assumed was a single creature was revealed to be a coordinated group of 4 to 5 massive beings. Body camera footage from multiple angles captures the moment when the officers realized they were completely surrounded. The creatures displayed an unsettling level of coordination that caught the officers off guard. Their movements appeared deliberate, blocking paths back toward the vehicles and forcing the team uphill into rougher terrain. It wasn't random aggression. It felt organized, as if the animals were responding to each other's cues. Standard law enforcement firearms proved largely ineffective against the attackers as they opened fire. Officers reported through radio that even direct hits seemed to have minimal impact, with the creatures showing remarkable resilience to conventional weapons. Radio communications became completely unreliable at this critical moment, with desperate calls for backup met only with static. The officers found themselves isolated in hostile territory, facing an enemy unlike anything in their training or experience. Deputies Jackson and Williams were the first casualties, their body cameras going dark after capturing terrifying footage of the coordinated attack. Sergeant Torres attempted to maintain unit cohesion and coordinate a defensive response, evident from the recording, but the creature's systematic approach quickly overwhelmed standard law enforcement tactics. Piecing together the evidence, what followed was not a chaotic animal attack, but a methodical elimination of the entire unit. The creatures demonstrated learned behavior, suggesting previous encounters with armed humans. Officer Blake's body camera captured the most complete record of the encounter. Her footage shows the rookie's terror as she witnessed her colleagues being systematically overwhelmed by these beings. Sergeant Torres's final transmission, captured at 4:35 p.m., was a desperate Mayday call requesting immediate evacuation and military support. His camera went dark moments later, leaving only the audio of his final moments. 3 officers initially survived the initial assault: Deputies Lee and Rodriguez, along with Officer Blake. Their body cameras document a harrowing retreat through increasingly treacherous terrain as winter conditions worked against them while seemingly favoring their pursuers. Every attempt to reach the patrol vehicles was thwarted, with the officers eventually discovering their transportation had been deliberately disabled or destroyed. Officer Blake, despite her terror, continued documenting the encounter, recognizing the importance of preserving evidence of what was happening to her unit. As darkness approached at 5:45 p.m., the surviving officers were driven to a rocky outcropping. Deputy Lee's final coherent radio transmission reported their position and requested immediate military intervention. Officer Blake's final body camera footage shows her attempting to hide memory cards from the various recording devices, recognizing that preserving evidence might be more important than her own survival. When backup units finally reached the scene that evening, they found only destroyed equipment and the carefully hidden memory cards that Officer Blake had managed to conceal. The massive search operation that followed involved federal agencies and military resources, but no trace of the missing officers was ever recovered. The official investigation concluded that the 7 officers had been killed by an unknown predator, with their bodies likely consumed or carried away by scavengers. However, the body camera footage tells a different story, one that challenges our understanding of what inhabits the remote wilderness areas of the Pacific Northwest. The Gifford Pinchot incident represents more than just a tragic loss of life. It provides documented evidence of intelligent, coordinated beings operating in our national forests with capabilities that far exceed anything in the known animal kingdom. The question that haunts investigators is not whether these creatures exist, but how long they have been systematically eliminating those who venture too deep into their territory. The 7 officers who entered Gifford Pinchot National Forest that January day were experienced professionals equipped with modern technology and weapons. Their fate serves as a sobering reminder that there are still mysteries in our world that conventional law enforcement is not equipped to handle. What vanished in the forests of Washington under military silence would reappear half a world away in Nepal, where another lens caught movement in the snow and captured something watching from the storm. In the thin air above Tengboche Monastery, where oxygen levels dropped to half that of sea level, experienced Sherpa guide Pemba navigated terrain on March 15, 2018, that would challenge even the most seasoned mountaineers. At 17,800 feet elevation, he was entering a realm where few humans venture, carrying critical supplies to a stranded research station as storm clouds gathered ominously from the Tibetan plateau. Pemba Sherpa, 38 years old and born in the shadow of Everest, possessed the kind of high-altitude expertise that comes only from generations of mountain living. His family had guided expeditions through these peaks for over a century, accumulating knowledge that no textbook could provide. On this particular morning, he carried more than just medical supplies and equipment. He bore the weight of traditional wisdom passed down through countless generations of his people. The supply run to the research station was urgent. Foreign scientists studying high-altitude physiology had been cut off by avalanche activity on the main trail, their radio communications increasingly desperate as medical emergencies developed among their team. Pemba had volunteered for the dangerous solo mission, choosing an unmarked route known only to local Sherpas to avoid the unstable snow conditions that had claimed several lives that season. His equipment was minimal by Western standards: traditional climbing gear, a heavy supply pack, and an older model smartphone that he carried primarily for emergency contact. Unlike the foreign climbers who relied heavily on GPS and satellite communication, Pemba navigated using landmarks invisible to outsiders, reading weather patterns through cloud formations and wind behavior that his grandfather had taught him decades earlier. The morning began with the crystalline clarity that only exists at extreme altitude, but Pemba's experienced eye detected subtle signs of approaching weather. Cloud formations building over Tibet, shifts in wind patterns, and the behavior of high-altitude birds all indicated that his weather window was narrowing faster than predicted. He increased his pace, knowing that being caught in a Himalayan storm at this elevation could prove fatal. At a small stone shrine marking the boundary between safe and sacred territory, Pemba paused for the traditional prayer his people had performed for centuries. This wasn't mere superstition, but acknowledgement that he was entering terrain where different rules applied. The mountain spirits, according to Sherpa belief, protected certain areas and demanded respect from those who passed through their domain. 2 hours into his climb, Pemba discovered tracks that made his blood freeze despite the sub-zero temperature. Pressed deep into wind-crusted snow were footprints unlike anything in his extensive mountain experience. Each print measured over 24 inches in length, clearly bipedal, with a stride that suggested a creature of enormous size and strength, moving with surprising grace across terrain that challenged even experienced climbers. Pemba's lifetime of high-altitude experience allowed him to read these tracks like a book. The depth of impression indicated massive weight, while the spacing and gait suggested intelligence and purpose rather than random animal movement. Most disturbing was their direction. The tracks paralleled his route toward the research station, as if whatever made them was following the same path. With hands shaking from both cold and recognition, Pemba used his phone to document the discovery. The device's battery drained rapidly in the extreme conditions, forcing him to conserve power for genuine emergencies. But these tracks represented something that transcended personal safety. They were evidence of what his people had known for generations, but the outside world dismissed as folklore. Traditional Sherpa knowledge immediately identified these prints as matching elder descriptions of Yeti encounters. This wasn't the first time such evidence had been found, but it was the first time someone with both cultural understanding and modern documentation tools had encountered it. Pemba realized he might be walking into territory that his ancestors had warned about for centuries. As he continued climbing, Pemba began noticing other signs that his traditional training had taught him to recognize. Ice formations were broken in patterns that suggested something large and dominant controlled this area. Deep calls began echoing off the surrounding peaks, vocalizations unlike anything in Pemba's extensive knowledge of Himalayan wildlife. The sounds carried a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the mountain itself, suggesting vocal cords of enormous size and power. Using his phone's limited recording capability, he captured brief audio samples, though the device's microphone struggled with both the extreme cold and the acoustic properties of the thin air. Weather conditions were deteriorating faster than his traditional forecasting had predicted. Visibility dropped to 20 feet as blowing snow created whiteout conditions that would have been fatal for less experienced climbers. But Pemba possessed navigation skills developed over decades of high-altitude guiding, using landmarks and terrain features that remained invisible to outsiders, even in clear conditions. Despite growing fear, his sense of duty to the stranded researchers drove him forward. People were depending on the medical supplies he carried, and abandoning the mission would violate both his professional ethics and cultural values about helping those in need. The approaching storm meant this might be the last opportunity to reach the station. In Ouachita National Forest, a 6-year-old wandered just beyond the lantern's reach. Minutes later, she stood at the tree line, unharmed, holding 3 pine cones and a feather. She spoke calmly about a tall camper nearby, though no one else in the forest had seen another person. It was April 14, 2020, when the first known recording surfaced. The audio itself had been captured 3 days earlier during a routine camping weekend. But April 14th marked when a mirrored copy appeared online. The leak begins with the faint voice of a young child questioning something just outside the microphone's range, asking why a sound is being repeated back to her. There is no adult response. Only shallow breathing and low-frequency interference appear in the background, similar to early signal compression in low-end wearable devices. The clip ends at 54 seconds. However, the cloud log tied to the smartwatch shows a recorded duration of 1 minute and 12 seconds. 18 seconds are missing from the beginning of the file, trimmed before the audio reached the internet. The file is not marked as corrupted. It appears to have been manually edited. The recording didn't enter the internet through cryptid or conspiracy forums. Instead, it was uploaded to a small camping safety group by someone asking how to recover full smartwatch logs. It wasn't presented as unusual, just a technical question about incomplete runtime on a child safety recording. From there, a compressed screen recording was copied into a Discord channel dedicated to unexplained vocal mimicry in wildlife captures. Multiple versions appeared within hours, each labeled differently. Some called it a child safety alert. Others labeled it a Sasquatch voice capture. None of the file names match the original cloud entry. What is confirmed is limited. A child's smartwatch activated its auto-record function. A second audio source responded to her speech. 18 seconds from the start of the original log are missing. No full copy has been released. The incident took place in Ouachita National Forest, a region described in trail reports as both openly used and strangely unmonitored. The area sits between officially marked family campgrounds and overflow clearings that hikers use when main sites reach capacity. These unofficial lots have no full-time ranger presence. Only a seasonal host monitors road activity, logging plates and noting when camps appear occupied. Cellular reception is intermittent, cutting in and out depending on proximity to the ridgelines. Calls connect clearly from higher ground, but drop suddenly once paths slope toward the creek corridors. The forest has documented black bear presence, though no recent attack records exist for that zone. A few archived forum posts from 2012 reference unusual branch knock sounds and low echo vocalizations heard at dusk near older logging cuts. But those posts were mostly dismissed by users familiar with barred owl call variants, which can resemble rhythmic knocks when echoing through timber. The family registered under a standard weekend pass. A permit photo briefly circulated showing 3 first names, Karen, Michael, and Emily, before remaining fields were blurred in subsequent mirrors. The mother and stepfather arrived mid-afternoon according to time-stamped social media photographs. Emily, approximately 6 years old, wore a lightweight LTE-enabled smartwatch intended for child tracking and emergency signaling. The device used an auto SOS recording feature that activates when either a loud sound crosses a preset decibel threshold or when the child moves beyond a set distance boundary relative to a paired phone. Their tent was positioned close to the southeast tree line with a battery lantern hanging from a branch about 5 feet off the ground, casting a limited circle of light. Beyond that circle, terrain sloped downward into a shallow ridge break, where pine needle buildup created a soft floor with almost no leaf crunch. 2 other families had set up camp within view, separated by roughly 120 to 150 yards, though their lantern light didn't reach the tree line. This spatial layout would later allow online map overlays to approximate Emily's movement direction relative to the audio source. The smartwatch was a commercially available unit marketed to parents of young children. It stores emergency recordings in segmented files, each capped at 2 minutes unless manually canceled. The auto record feature doesn't stop immediately when the triggering sound or motion ceases. It runs until either the user taps the screen, a stable signal is re-established, or the device's motion algorithm classifies movement as resumed safe proximity. Analysts noted that the missing 18-second portion was unlikely due to automatic timeout and more consistent with manual trimming or export limits. Emily's play radius extended slightly beyond the lantern's reach. No barrier existed, and soft pine duff masked footsteps. In later 3D map reconstructions, this silence suggested she moved no more than 30 to 40 yards beyond visible light, far enough for Karen and Michael to lose direct sight, but still within assumed safety boundaries. Scattered hiking logs noted that the area experiences temperature inversion pockets at night, causing sound to carry unevenly. Voices travel clearly downslope while remaining muffled when calling from below. Some early comments beneath the leaked audio reference this, suggesting the parents might have been calling for Emily while she remained only partially able to hear them. As with most remote forest pull-offs, no permanent surveillance monitored the site. The only digital record came from devices the family brought, a smartphone with inconsistent signal and the smartwatch that triggered automatically. In the absence of external feeds, the smartwatch audio became the primary data point for what happened beyond the lantern's reach. The first automatic recording begins at 2021, according to the device log, triggered when Emily crossed the distance boundary threshold. She steps just beyond the lantern's visible range. The smartwatch registers a brief accelerometer shift consistent with gentle slope descent, followed by reduced ambient noise. The audio profile shows only footstep friction against soft duff and light fabric movement from her jacket. No voices are present. Background captures faint insect patterns and one isolated wind gust through dry pine branches. The audio stabilizes quickly, confirming calm, controlled movement. 3 minutes into the overall timeline, the audio shows a subtle drop in environmental frequency response, a common acoustic effect during temperature inversion near shallow ridges. Lower frequency bands flatten, creating a perceptible quiet space. Emily's breathing becomes slightly more audible, indicating she had slowed or paused. No adult voices can be heard calling. A second file begins at 2024, triggered by a short vocal emission from Emily just under the SOS threshold. Community waveform breakdowns show that just over 0.31 seconds after she speaks, a low-frequency response appears faintly at the bottom of the spectrogram. The pattern doesn't match owl or coyote signatures recorded from the area. Instead, it aligns closer to a delayed consonant shadow, a mimic effect where the responding sound mirrors the rhythm of the child's speech, but with shifted pitch and incomplete articulation. At 2030, audio captures a surface change. Pine duff gives way to compacted soil, likely part of an old game trail. Emily's footsteps become clearer, but no distress sounds are recorded. The responding audio signature doesn't appear again in this segment. The smartwatch shows a stable local recording profile with no dropouts. At 20:33, a third recording triggers after another motion spike. 2 percussive sounds occur in clean succession with 1.7 seconds between them. In comparison tests compiled by users, typical branch drops show irregular timing due to bounce and roll. These 2 sounds remain evenly timed with minimal decay distortion, suggesting intentional patterning rather than environmental coincidence. The knocks don't coincide with rainfall or wind bursts. No third sound follows. Emily's breathing is steady throughout. At this point, Emily's estimated distance from the main campsite is 35 to 40 yards based on spatial mapping. No light from the lantern reaches the area. Terrain continues sloping gently. No predator sounds or wildlife alarms are present. At 20:36, Karen made initial contact with local emergency services. Her tone was calm, the report marked as a precautionary welfare check rather than an active missing child emergency. The call summary noted she believed Emily had stepped just beyond the brush line, and that visibility was limited. No urgency codes were activated. Michael can be faintly heard in the background of the smartwatch audio around this timestamp, though too distant to register clearly. Despite intermittent coverage typical of the region, the smartwatch maintains a weak but stable connection. However, GPS embedding for these segments remains blank, suggesting that while cellular signal was partially active, location tracking was impaired by canopy interference and terrain angle. At 20:41, a responding ranger, already on routine evening patrol nearby, activates body camera recording and arrives at the campsite. Only a 14-second fragment from this footage appears in the leaked compilation. In the clip, the ranger pans the thermal view toward the tree line. As the device runs a routine NUC calibration, the image flickers. During that reset, a faint secondary heat trace briefly registers near the frame edge before the image normalizes. The clip cuts abruptly. Emily was located seconds after the thermal sweep. She was standing upright at the edge of a shallow game trail, roughly 35 yards downslope from the main campsite. The ranger's initial observation noted she didn't appear disoriented or distressed. She was holding 3 small green pine cones in one hand and a single pale feather in the other, both gripped with steady posture, suggesting deliberate collection rather than panic. Emily made visual contact with the ranger before either parent reached her. According to internal field notes referenced in community summaries, she didn't run toward the ranger or call out. Instead, she remained in place, turning once toward the tree line behind her before shifting her weight slightly uphill. When Karen and Michael reached her, Emily made a brief comment about someone she referred to as the tall camper, asking if they were allowed to come back to the campsite as well. That phrasing appeared once in unofficial paraphrased notes shared online by users who claimed to have seen a blurred portion of the ranger's follow-up form. Official documents released publicly didn't include any mention of a second figure, and no additional individuals were registered in surrounding camps based on permit records. During scene documentation, Emily initially held all 3 pine cones. Before personnel could photograph them in her hand, she placed them down in a straight line on the ground. Personnel noted the placement appeared intentional rather than dropped. The line of pine cones sat parallel to a faint indentation in the moss. In those images, a subtle secondary impression appears to the right of the cones, consistent with a larger, flatter weight distribution. The 3 pine cones were bagged and tagged with rough GPS coordinates before being logged as non-critical physical items. No conclusion was attached to the secondary indentation. Emily showed no signs of environmental exposure beyond light dirt on her shoes and sleeves. Her smartwatch remained active, still running its safety monitoring process. The device had logged a final vibration alert at 20:43, indicating proximity reacquisition to the paired phone when Karen came within 30 feet. The ranger's on-scene assessment didn't classify the event as a separation emergency. It was recorded as a resolved welfare check with no injuries or missing time. Emily's breathing and heart rate, based on smartwatch biometrics, remained within normal ranges. No elevated stress markers were detected in available log segments. Later that evening, Karen and Michael dismantled part of their setup, repositioning their tent closer to the center of the clearing. No additional calls were made to emergency services. Campsite records show they remained through the night and checked out at normal time the following morning. The feather, later identified as belonging to a regional bird species, drew less focus. However, viewers pointed out it appeared clean and free of debris, unlike others found on forest floors, raising speculation it had been hand-picked or recently dislodged rather than collected from the ground. Emily didn't provide any formal statement. No transcript exists. The only public reference to her description remains that single, paraphrased line from the leaked ranger form, later removed from circulation following takedown requests. After Emily was recovered, a brief sweep of the immediate area was conducted. The ground consisted of compact soil layered with thin pine needles and intermittent moss patches. That surface allowed shallow impression retention, but wasn't soft enough for deep, well-defined tracks. Two distinct compression patterns were noted. The first matched expected dimensions of a child's footstep, showing narrow pressure points consistent with lightweight footwear and heel-to-toe distribution. These impressions lined up with Emily's known path and were spaced in typical walking rhythm. The second pattern appeared adjacent to hers at irregular intervals. It didn't display the same stride profile or directional roll typical of human walking. Instead of defined heel impact and forward pressure, the second pattern showed broader surface contact, as if weight had been distributed across a wider base rather than through sequential foot mechanics. The shape lacked clear outlines, only shallow oval depressions with minimal edge definition, suggesting heavier mass pressing downward in flat contact. These impressions paralleled Emily's track line for approximately 10 to 12 feet before fading into compressed undergrowth where no distinct impressions were retained. Amateur analysts later overlaid measurement grids and concluded that spacing of the secondary compressions suggested stride distance slightly longer than an adult human's average step length, though still within plausible range for someone moving slowly on uneven terrain. Beyond the last recorded impression, a small fragment of hair fiber was found snagged on rough bark of a low branch. It was collected and sealed under routine procedure. Internal labeling captured briefly in a leaked evidence sheet listed the entry as hair sample, non-human, pending classification. According to later forum discussions, the sample was sent to a state wildlife database, but returned no species match. The entry was subsequently marked inconclusive and archived without further testing. The sample number wasn't referenced again in mirrored reports available online. A volunteer analyst later slowed down the ranger's body cam footage. In one frame, a thin, light-colored thread-like shape can be seen near the branch where the sample was taken. Image resolution is too low to confirm whether it matches the collected sample. Enhancement attempts only increase digital noise and artifacts. The moss compression map generated by online contributors marked two parallel movement lines, one labeled as child path, the other as unknown. The unknown line showed less defined stride sequencing, with pressure appearing sporadically rather than distributed through consistent step cycles. Supporters of the mimicry interpretation pointed to this as evidence of non-human locomotion. Others argued that anyone moving cautiously without raising heels fully could leave similar marks, especially if barefoot or wearing soft, wide-soled boots. No claw, paw, or clear footwear outline was found. The impressions remained ambiguous, reduced to weight presence without identifiable footprint shape. Forest Service personnel didn't classify the impressions as track evidence. Official assessment referred to them only as localized surface compression, consistent with recent human or wildlife movement. No plaster casts were made. Scene preservation was not initiated. By the following afternoon, most surface disturbance had been obscured by wind, foot traffic, and natural debris shift. Once the audio clip began circulating beyond camping forums, hobby analysts extracted the waveform and flagged a specific point. At 22.4 seconds into the 54-second clip, later referred to as timestamp 0:22.4, Emily's voice produces a clear frequency spike. Just over 0.31 seconds later, a second spike appears on the waveform. Overlays show her initial vocal ridge as narrow and high frequency, followed by a lower, broader response signal that doesn't match her pitch or breath pattern. When metadata was extracted, a raw tag appeared in the hex log: profile, unmatched, cadence, flagged. Community parsers noted that the device labeled the response event as user 2, a designation enthusiasts believe is applied when cadence doesn't match the registered profile. This labeling behavior isn't confirmed by the manufacturer and may not apply to wildlife or ambient noise. Spectrogram renderings show the response peak has an independent decay curve, rather than the softened trail expected from wind bounce or echo reverb. The event reads as a separate sound source, not a continuation of the child's voice. This moment became the core of what discussion threads called the cadence imitation debate. One side argued the second waveform peak was an environmental artifact, a micro-echo created by wind pressure across the smartwatch microphone, producing a delayed pulse that only appeared to mirror speech timing. Others countered that the delay fell inside the response window normally associated with human conversational pacing, noticeably tighter than the gap seen in barred owl mimic sequences or wildlife call overlaps. Breath noise in the low band during the return signal shows flattened airflow modulation, not matching standard human inhale-exhale rhythm. However, compression artifacts make that inconclusive. No official agency released a spectrogram. All available breakdowns are community-generated, pulled from mirrors of varying quality. Despite multiple recompressions, timing alignment at 0022.4 remained consistent across every known copy. Once the clip spread beyond small audio forums, discussion divided into distinct camps. Some classified it as a staged viral attempt, suggesting Michael had intentionally trimmed the recording to generate mystery around a harmless moment in the woods. They referenced the missing 18 seconds as deliberate editing to create artificial tension. Another group treated it as wildlife mimicry, comparing the return sound to known raven echo patterns recorded in mixed conifer regions. They argued the flattened secondary peak could be explained by ambient call rebound distorted through low-quality compression. A third cluster, referred to as the cadence tracking crowd, pointed to primate mimicry studies documenting delayed rhythmic imitation behaviors. They used the 0.31 second gap as a marker, arguing timing alone separated the clip from the typical bird or owl response patterns. During this debate, a blurred image surfaced allegedly from a ranger's internal field form. In that image, one line read, "Auditory anomaly, non-parental source noted," before the rest was obscured by black redaction blocks. No verified source confirmed authenticity, but it circulated heavily before takedown requests removed most copies. Karen and Michael didn't respond to public inquiries after leaving the campsite. Michael's social media accounts were closed within 2 days of the leak circulating. The Forest Service issued a brief notice stating all audio involving minors fell under privacy protection classification and wouldn't be released in full. Takedown claims began targeting mirrored uploads across multiple platforms, citing unauthorized distribution of a minor's recorded voice. In response, online users shifted to mapping the pinecone evidence coordinates, tracing a narrow offshoot trail running deeper into the brush, away from established campground paths. In weeks following takedowns, a few small YouTube channels focused on trail documentation visited the campsite location. Their videos showed shallow duff impressions and moss patches, similar to those in leaked evidence photos. One hiker using a budget thermal monocular reported a brief cold gap in the same sector where the ranger's body cam experienced its calibration blackout. The footage didn't claim any encounter or discovery. Some users referred to this as a residual thermal mask, a known effect where a recently present warm mass leaves a temporary cold contrast void when viewed after a delay, though the device quality limits confidence. Analysts reviewing timing confirmed the response pattern matched Emily's syllable spacing twice, both within a 300 millisecond reaction window. No language was formed, only timing alignment. With no further recording and the missing 18 seconds unrecovered, the discussion narrowed to a single unresolved point. If it wasn't human, then what matched her rhythm so precisely? On October 3, 2019, 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez disappeared from Cascade Falls Campground in the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, Washington. What started as a family camping trip turned into the most documented Bigfoot encounter in Pacific Northwest history, captured entirely on her father's GoPro camera. The footage would later reveal a truth so extraordinary that it challenges everything we thought we knew about the wilderness. Emma Rodriguez was an adventurous third grader from Bellingham, Washington, who loved exploring the outdoors with her family. Her father, Miguel Rodriguez, was a 34-year-old park ranger who had worked in the Mount Baker area for over 8 years. Her mother, Sarah, taught elementary school and shared Miguel's passion for hiking and camping. The family made monthly trips to various locations throughout the Cascades, always choosing remote spots where Emma could safely explore and learn about nature. October 3rd was supposed to be a perfect autumn camping trip. The Rodriguez family had reserved Campsite 14 at Cascade Falls, a secluded spot about 12 miles from the nearest road. Miguel had chosen this location specifically because it offered excellent hiking trails suitable for Emma's age, plus a beautiful waterfall that she had been asking to see for months. The weather forecast called for clear skies and mild temperatures, ideal conditions for their planned 3-day adventure. What Miguel didn't know was that this particular area had a history of unexplained incidents. Park records, which he had never reviewed for this remote section, documented 5 missing person cases over the past 15 years. 3 involved children under the age of 12. All had occurred during the fall months, and none had ever been fully resolved. The family arrived at Cascade Falls Campground at 2:30 p.m. on October 3, 2019. Miguel's routine was always the same: set up camp first, then explore. He had mounted his GoPro Hero 7 on a chest harness that morning, planning to document their entire trip for Emma's school project about Pacific Northwest ecosystems. The camera would run continuously throughout their stay, capturing what would become the most important footage in cryptozoology history. Emma was immediately fascinated by the campground's natural features. The site sat in a clearing surrounded by towering Douglas firs and western hemlocks, with Cascade Creek running just 50 yards away. The sound of the waterfall, about a quarter-mile upstream, created a constant background noise that Emma found magical. She spent the first hour collecting interesting rocks and leaves, while Miguel and Sarah set up their tent and organized their supplies. At 4:15 p.m., the GoPro captured Emma discovering something unusual near the creek. She called out to her parents, pointing excitedly at what appeared to be a large footprint pressed into the muddy bank. Miguel, with his ranger training, immediately recognized that it was unlike any animal track he had seen in his 8 years of forest service. The print measured roughly 14 inches long and 6 inches wide, with clearly defined toe impressions that suggested a bipedal creature. "Dad, what kind of animal makes tracks like this?" Emma asked, her voice clearly audible on the recording. Miguel's response revealed his confusion. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. It's bigger than a bear track, but the shape is all wrong. Maybe it's just an old print that got distorted by the rain." But Emma wasn't satisfied with that explanation. Her natural curiosity, encouraged by years of family hiking trips, made her want to investigate further. The GoPro footage shows her following the creek bank, looking for more prints while her parents finished setting up camp. What she found would change everything. At 4:32 p.m., Emma discovered a series of prints leading away from the creek and into the dense forest. The tracks were fresh, pressed into soft earth that had been moistened by morning dew, but not yet dried by the afternoon sun. More importantly, they showed a clear pattern of bipedal movement with a stride length that suggested something much larger than a human, but walking upright like one. "Mom! Dad! Come look at this!" Emma's excited voice echoed through the forest. The camera captured Miguel and Sarah hurrying to join their daughter, who was kneeling beside the clearest print they had seen yet. Sarah's background in education made her naturally analytical, and she immediately began asking questions that would prove crucial later. "How deep do you think this is, Miguel?" she asked, running her finger along the edge of the impression. "And look at these toe marks. They're so detailed. This had to be made recently, maybe even today." Miguel's ranger instincts kicked in. He began documenting the prints with his phone camera while the GPORE continued recording from his chest. The footage shows him measuring the prints with a small ruler from Emma's school supplies, noting the depth, width, and spacing between tracks. His professional training was evident as he carefully avoided disturbing the evidence while gathering as much information as possible. What happened next would haunt the Rodriguez family forever. At 4:47 p.m., while Miguel and Sarah were focused on documenting the footprints, Emma wandered about 30 yards deeper into the forest, following what appeared to be a faint trail. The GoPro, still mounted on Miguel's chest, captured her small figure moving between the trees, her bright red jacket making her easy to spot against the dark forest backdrop. "Emma, don't go too far," Sarah called out, but her daughter was already partially hidden by the thick undergrowth. The camera shows Emma stopping beside a massive fallen log, examining something on the ground that had caught her attention. She appeared to be talking to herself, a habit she had when making discoveries during their family hikes. At exactly 4:52 p.m., the GoPro recorded a sound that would later be analyzed by an endless amount of audio experts around the world. A low, resonant call echoed through the forest, not quite human, but far more complex than any known animal vocalization. The sound lasted approximately 8 seconds and seemed to come from multiple directions at once, suggesting either multiple sources or sophisticated acoustic manipulation. Emma's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of showing fear, she displayed the curiosity that her parents had always encouraged. The footage shows her turning toward the sound, taking several steps in its direction. "Hello?" she called out, her young voice carrying clearly through the forest. "Is someone there?" Miguel and Sarah heard both the strange call and Emma's response. The camera captured their immediate alarm as they realized their daughter was no longer visible from their position. "Emma!" Miguel shouted, his voice tight with sudden concern. "Come back here right now." But Emma didn't respond. The GoPro footage shows Miguel and Sarah crashing through the undergrowth, calling their daughter's name repeatedly. They reached the fallen log where Emma had been standing just moments before, but she was nowhere to be seen. Her small footprints were clearly visible in the soft earth, leading toward a dense thicket of salmonberry bushes and young firs. What the camera captured next defied explanation. As Miguel pushed through the thicket, following Emma's trail, a massive dark shape moved between the trees about 50 yards ahead. The figure was upright, easily 8 feet tall, and moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Most remarkably, it appeared to be carrying something, a small bundle that could have been a child. "Sarah, do you see that?" Miguel's voice was barely a whisper, but the camera's sensitive microphone picked up every word. The footage shows him stopping abruptly, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Sarah moved up beside him, and her sharp intake of breath was clearly audible when she spotted the figure. The creature, for lack of a better term, seemed aware of their presence. It paused at the edge of a small clearing, turning slightly in their direction. The GoPro captured what appeared to be a face, though the distance and forest shadows made details difficult to discern. What was clear was the intelligence in its posture, the deliberate way it assessed the situation before continuing deeper into the forest. The figure disappeared into the dense forest, moving with surprising speed despite its size and apparent burden. Miguel and Sarah gave chase, but the thick undergrowth and uneven terrain made it impossible to keep up. The GoPro footage became chaotic, showing glimpses of trees, sky, and forest floor as Miguel struggled through the wilderness. For the next 47 minutes, the camera documented their frantic search. They called Emma's name continuously, their voices growing hoarse with desperation. They found broken branches and disturbed vegetation that suggested something large had passed through, but no sign of their daughter. As daylight began to fade, Miguel made the decision that would save their lives, but haunt them forever. "We need to get help," he told Sarah, his voice heavy with defeat. "We can't search this forest in the dark, and we need professional rescue teams." The hike back to their campsite took 23 minutes, every step captured by the still-running GoPro. The footage shows their growing desperation as they realized how vast and impenetrable the forest truly was. By the time they reached their tent, it was nearly dark, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Miguel's first call was to his supervisor at the Park Service, Ranger Captain Lisa Chen. The GoPro captured his side of the conversation, his professional training warring with his parental panic as he tried to explain what had happened. "Lisa, I need immediate search and rescue at Cascade Falls Campground. My daughter is missing, and I think something took her." Captain Chen's response was swift and professional. Within 2 hours, the first search teams arrived at the campground. The initial response included 12 rangers, 2 dog units, and a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging equipment. The search would eventually expand to include over 60 personnel and cover more than 40 square miles of wilderness. But the most crucial evidence was already in Miguel's possession. The GoPro footage, which he initially forgot about in his panic, would provide investigators with the most detailed documentation of a Bigfoot encounter ever recorded. When he finally remembered the camera the next morning, the implications of what they had captured began to sink in. Detective Ray Morrison of the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office was assigned as the lead investigator for Emma's disappearance. A 20-year veteran with extensive experience in wilderness search and rescue, Morrison had seen his share of missing person cases. But when Miguel showed him the GoPro footage, Morrison knew he was dealing with something unprecedented. "In 20 years of law enforcement, I've never seen anything like this," Morrison later testified. The footage clearly shows a large, bipedal creature carrying what appears to be a child. The movement patterns, the size, the apparent intelligence, it doesn't match any known animal in the Pacific Northwest. The investigation that followed was unlike any missing person case in Washington state history. Traditional search methods were combined with cryptozoology research, audio analysis, and behavioral studies. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was consulted, though their involvement was kept confidential to avoid media sensationalism. Dr. Amanda Foster, a primatologist from the University of Washington, was brought in to analyze the creature footage. Her initial assessment was cautious but intriguing. The locomotion patterns suggest a large primate, but the size and proportions don't match any known species. The way it carries the burden, presumably the child, shows remarkable care and intelligence. Audio expert Dr. James Whitfield analyzed the vocalizations captured on the GPORO. His findings were equally puzzling. The calls demonstrate a vocal range and complexity that exceeds human capabilities while showing structured patterns that suggest intentional communication. There are harmonic frequencies that don't occur in any cataloged North American wildlife. The search for Emma continued for 2 weeks, involving hundreds of volunteers and professional searchers. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over the forest. Ground teams with dogs covered every accessible trail and creek bed. The effort was one of the largest wilderness searches in Pacific Northwest history. On October 17th, 14 days after Emma's disappearance, hiker Jennifer Walsh made a discovery that would change everything. While exploring a remote area about 8 miles from the original campsite, she found a small clearing that showed signs of recent habitation. The site included a crude shelter made from branches and moss, a circle of stones that had been used for a fire, and most importantly, Emma's red jacket hanging from a low branch. The jacket was clean and undamaged, carefully placed as if someone had wanted it to be found. Nearby, investigators discovered more of the large footprints, along with smaller impressions that could have been made by a child's bare feet. The evidence suggested that Emma had been in this location recently, and that she had been cared for rather than harmed. But the most extraordinary discovery came from a motion-activated trail cam that Jennifer had set up in the area 6 months earlier for a wildlife photography project. The camera had captured footage from the night of October 16th, just 1 day before the jacket was found. The trail camera footage showed Emma Rodriguez, very much alive, sitting beside a small fire in the clearing. She appeared healthy and unharmed, though her clothes were dirty and her hair was tangled. Most remarkably, she was not alone. The massive figure from Miguel's GoPro footage was clearly visible, sitting across the fire from Emma, in what appeared to be a protective posture. The creature's features were more visible in the trail camera footage than they had been in the original GoPro recording. It was clearly humanoid but covered in dark, coarse hair. Its face showed intelligence and what could only be described as gentleness as it watched Emma. The footage captured the creature offering Emma what appeared to be berries and roots, which she accepted and ate without fear. Perhaps most incredible was the apparent communication between Emma and her captor. The audio captured Emma talking to the creature in her normal voice, as if having a conversation with a friend. While the creature's responses were not in any recognizable language, they showed clear patterns and seemed to be direct replies to Emma's comments. "I miss my mom and dad." Emma's voice was clearly audible on the recording. "When can I go home?" The creature's response was a series of low, melodic sounds that seemed almost mournful. It reached out with one massive hand and gently touched Emma's shoulder in what appeared to be a comforting gesture. The trail camera footage ran for 37 minutes before the subjects moved out of frame. The final images showed the creature carefully banking the fire and leading Emma deeper into the forest, its hand protectively on her shoulder. This discovery prompted an immediate expansion of the search effort. The area around Jennifer's clearing became the focus of intensive investigation, with teams of searchers combing every square foot of the surrounding forest. But despite their efforts, no further trace of Emma or her mysterious companion was found. The case took another dramatic turn on October 23rd when Emma Rodriguez walked out of the forest on her own. She appeared at the Cascade Falls trailhead at approximately 6:30 a.m., dirty and tired, but otherwise unharmed. Hikers who found her described her as calm and coherent, asking only to see her parents. Emma's reunion with Miguel and Sarah was captured by news cameras that had been maintaining a vigil at the search headquarters. The footage shows a healthy, alert child who seemed remarkably untraumatized by her 3-week ordeal in the wilderness. Her first words to her parents were, "I'm okay. He took good care of me." The medical examination that followed found Emma to be in surprisingly good health. She had lost some weight and showed signs of exposure to the elements, but had no injuries or indications of abuse. Most remarkably, she had somehow avoided the hypothermia and dehydration that would normally be expected after 3 weeks in the wilderness. Emma's account of her experience was both fascinating and troubling. She described being carried through the forest by what she called the big man, who had taken her to a safe place where she wouldn't get lost. According to Emma, the creature had provided her with food, water, and shelter, protecting her from the cold and rain. "He was really nice," Emma told investigators. "He couldn't talk like us, but he understood when I was scared or hungry. He showed me which berries were safe to eat and how to stay warm at night. He missed his family too." Child psychologist Dr. Maria Santos, who conducted extensive interviews with Emma, found no evidence of trauma or fabrication. Emma's account is remarkably consistent and detailed. She shows no signs of the psychological distress typically associated with abduction or abuse. Her descriptions of the creature's behavior suggest a level of care and protection that's difficult to explain. Perhaps most intriguing were Emma's drawings of her experience. Her artwork showed detailed depictions of the creature, the forest shelters where they stayed, and various scenes from their time together. The drawings matched the physical evidence found at the campsites and corroborated details from the trail camera footage. Emma also provided information that led to the discovery of 2 additional campsites where she and the creature had stayed during her time in the forest. Both sites showed the same careful construction and evidence of fire use, along with more of the large footprints. The sites were connected by what appeared to be a network of trails known only to the creature. The scientific community's response to Emma's case was divided but intense. Cryptozoologists hailed it as definitive proof of Bigfoot's existence, pointing to the multiple forms of evidence: video footage, audio recordings, physical tracks, and eyewitness testimony from a credible source. Skeptics argued that the case, while extraordinary, still fell short of the scientific proof required to confirm a new species. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University and a leading Bigfoot researcher, analyzed all the available evidence. His conclusion was cautiously optimistic. The Rodriguez case presents the most compelling collection of evidence for the existence of a large, unknown primate in North America. The combination of video documentation, physical evidence, and witness testimony creates a picture that is difficult to dismiss through conventional explanations. The physical evidence collected during Emma's disappearance underwent extensive scientific analysis. Hair samples found at the campsites were examined by Dr. Melba Ketchum's laboratory in Texas, known for its work on cryptid DNA analysis. The results were inconclusive but intriguing. The samples showed primate characteristics but didn't match any known species in genetic databases. Plaster casts of the footprints revealed dermal ridges and anatomical details that would be nearly impossible to fake. The prints showed wear patterns consistent with a creature that walked primarily on forest terrain, with calloused areas that suggested a lifetime of barefoot travel through rough wilderness. The audio analysis proved equally compelling. Dr. Scott Nelson, a former Navy cryptologic linguist, studied the vocalizations captured on both Miguel's GoPro and the trail camera. His findings suggested a complex communication system with consistent phonetic patterns that resembled language structure. "What we're hearing isn't random animal sounds," Dr. Nelson explained. "There are repeated phonemes, tonal variations that suggest meaning, and response patterns that indicate genuine communication. This creature appears to have a sophisticated vocal language." Emma's case also revealed a disturbing pattern of similar incidents throughout the Pacific Northwest. Research conducted by the Olympic Project, a Bigfoot investigation organization, uncovered 17 cases of missing children in Washington and Oregon over the past 30 years. In 12 of these cases, the children were found alive after several days, often with stories of being cared for by a big, hairy man in the forest. Most of these earlier cases had been dismissed as childhood fantasy or trauma-induced false memories. But Emma's case, with its extensive documentation, forced investigators to reconsider these previous incidents. Patterns emerged that were too consistent to ignore. Children between ages 6 and 10, disappearances during fall months, recovery after 3 to 7 days, and remarkably similar descriptions of their caretaker. The Rodriguez family's life changed dramatically after Emma's return. Miguel took extended leave from his ranger position, struggling to reconcile his scientific training with what he had witnessed. Sarah left her teaching job to focus on Emma's recovery and to research similar cases. The family moved to a smaller town away from the media attention, seeking privacy to process their extraordinary experience. Emma herself seemed remarkably well adjusted, though she occasionally spoke about missing her friend in the forest. Child psychologists noted that she showed none of the typical signs of trauma associated with abduction cases. Instead, she displayed increased confidence and a deeper connection to nature that surprised her parents. "She's different now," Sarah explained to investigators. "More mature, more aware of the natural world around her. It's like she learned something out there that most people never get to experience." The case attracted international attention from researchers, media outlets, and cryptozoology enthusiasts. The Rodriguez family received thousands of letters from people sharing their own encounters with similar creatures. Many of these accounts had never been reported to authorities, their witnesses fearing ridicule or disbelief. Dr. Grover Krantz's research archives at Washington State University became a focal point for analyzing these reports. Patterns emerged showing a concentration of sightings in the same general area where Emma disappeared, suggesting a stable population of these creatures in the remote wilderness of the North Cascades. The Native American perspective added crucial context to Emma's case. Elder Joseph Moses of the Lummi Nation explained that his people had always known about the Stick Indians, forest beings who occasionally interacted with humans, particularly children. According to tribal tradition, these encounters were not to be feared, but respected as connections to the ancient wisdom of the forest. "The old stories tell us that sometimes the forest people take care of lost children," Moses shared. "They return them when it's safe, when they've learned what they needed to learn." Your daughter was chosen for something special. The investigation officially concluded 6 months after Emma's return, with the case classified as resolved but unexplained. Detective Morrison's final report acknowledged that while Emma had been safely returned, the circumstances of her disappearance and care remained beyond conventional explanation. The physical evidence was preserved in a special collection at the University of Washington, available for future research. The GoPro footage and trail camera recordings were digitally archived and made available to qualified researchers worldwide. Emma's case sparked changes in how missing person investigations are conducted in wilderness areas. Search protocols now include consultation with cryptozoology researchers and Native American tribal authorities. Trail cameras are deployed more extensively, and unusual evidence is preserved rather than dismissed. 5 years later, Emma Rodriguez is now 13 years old and thriving in her new community. She has become an advocate for wilderness conservation and frequently speaks about the importance of respecting unknown species that may share our forests. Her experience has inspired a new generation of researchers dedicated to understanding the mysteries that still exist in our world. The Rodriguez family established the Emma Rodriguez Foundation for Wilderness Research, which funds scientific investigation of unexplained phenomena in natural settings. The foundation has supported dozens of research projects and maintains a database of similar encounters reported throughout North America. Miguel returned to ranger work, but in a different capacity, serving as a liaison between park services and cryptozoology researchers. His experience has helped bridge the gap between traditional wildlife management and the investigation of unknown species. The creature that cared for Emma has never been seen again, despite extensive monitoring of the area where she was found. Motion-activated cameras continue to operate throughout the region, and researchers maintain hope that additional evidence will emerge. Emma's case remains one of the most documented and credible Bigfoot encounters in history. The combination of video evidence, physical traces, and credible witness testimony has convinced many skeptics that something extraordinary exists in the remote wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. Whether that something is a surviving population of ancient primates, an unknown species of human relative, or something else entirely, remains to be determined. But Emma Rodriguez's 3 weeks in the forest proved that our world still holds mysteries that challenge our understanding of what's possible. The truth about what happened to 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez may never be fully understood, but her safe return and the evidence of her care by an unknown forest dweller suggests that sometimes, in the deepest wilderness, we are not as alone as we think. And sometimes that's not something to fear, but something to wonder about. A security camera in the forests of Northern California captured something extraordinary at 2:47 a.m. on March 15, 2025. The footage reveals a massive figure emerging from the tree line, standing roughly 8 feet tall and covered in thick, dark hair. What makes this encounter particularly compelling is the creature's distinctive features. The shoulders span an incredible width, while the arms hang unnaturally low, extending well past the waist. The head displays that characteristic cone shape we've seen in other encounters, balanced on what appears to be an extremely thick, muscular neck. The movement pattern is unlike anything we'd expect from a human or known primate. So what are we looking at? The Henderson family had been experiencing strange phenomena for weeks leading up to this sighting. They reported hearing mysterious knocking sounds echoing through the night, heavy footsteps circling their remote cabin, and discovering massive handprints smeared across their windows each morning. They couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. But what truly sets this footage apart is the creature's behavior. This isn't just a brief glimpse of something passing through. For nearly 3 full minutes, the figure remains completely motionless, methodically tilting its head as if studying every detail of the cabin structure. The level of intelligence and curiosity displayed is genuinely unsettling. Then, without warning, it simply vanishes back into the darkness. No sound, no disturbance of the surrounding vegetation. Just an eerie silence and countless unanswered questions about what the Henderson family truly encountered that night. Why watch so closely, and what did it want? If the Henderson family's footage showed a creature studying a remote cabin, the next case suggests that the same calculated behavior is no longer confined to the wilderness. What happens when that watchful presence follows people right to their very front doors? However, one of the most chilling encounters of 2025 didn't happen deep in some remote forest. It occurred right in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Spokane, Washington. May 22, 2025, at 11:43 p.m. The Martinez family was fast asleep when their motion sensors activated. The security camera flickered on, and what stepped into frame left everyone stunned. A massive figure, nearly 8 feet tall, with reddish-brown hair. The shoulders were so broad, they practically filled the entire doorway. But here's what makes this footage absolutely terrifying. The creature's behavior was completely deliberate and methodical. This wasn't some confused animal that had wandered into human territory by accident. Every movement suggested intentional reconnaissance. For over 4 minutes, this thing stood just feet from the front door, systematically moving its head from side to side, as if cataloging every detail of the house's layout. The most disturbing part? It appeared to be testing the door handle, gently manipulating it as though trying to determine whether the entrance was secured. The implications are bone-chilling. What would have happened if that door had been unlocked? This wasn't some isolated wilderness encounter. This was a family home in suburban Spokane, complete with street lights and neighbors just yards away. The question that haunts investigators is whether these creatures are becoming bolder in their interactions with humans, or if their natural habitat is shrinking so dramatically that our worlds are inevitably colliding. What happened outside their home suggested intent, a presence studying its surroundings with patience. Weeks later in the Cascades, it would happen again, this time tracked not by door cameras, but by military-grade thermal optics in the dead of night. Deep in the Cascade Mountains of Washington state, thermal imaging technology captured what could be one of the most scientifically compelling Bigfoot evidence ever recorded. On June 8, 2025, a team of wildlife researchers conducting a nocturnal elk migration study documented something that has baffled them. The encounter occurred at 2:15 a.m. at an elevation of 4,200 feet. The research team had positioned their thermal equipment to track elk movement patterns, but instead recorded a massive heat signature moving purposefully through the dense forest. What appeared on screen was absolutely unmistakable. A bipedal figure standing nearly 8.5 feet tall, radiating heat like a living furnace against the cold mountain air. But this wasn't just about size and shape. The thermal readout revealed biological functions that would be impossible to fake. The creature's core temperature was running significantly hot, with extremities cooling in precise patterns that indicated active blood flow regulation. No costume or prop could possibly mimic this level of physiological detail. Every few seconds, visible plumes of breath appeared on the thermal display, regular, controlled, and undeniably alive. The stride analysis was equally remarkable. Each step covered approximately 6 feet, with weight distribution patterns far beyond anything humanly possible. The figure moved with incredible purpose, effortlessly clearing fallen logs and dense brush without a single stumble or hesitation. How does something that massive navigate through pitch-black forest terrain with such precision? The recording continued for a total of 12 minutes. This wasn't some blurry glimpse or fleeting shadow. This was sustained documentation of a creature displaying body heat, respiratory patterns, and apparent awareness that defies conventional explanation. The evidence raises one critical question that skeptics have yet to answer. If this footage was somehow fabricated, how do you fake active body heat, controlled breathing patterns, and intelligent awareness in the middle of a remote mountain wilderness at 2 a.m.? This footage hinted at a lone being moving with calculated strength through the night. However, the next footage didn't capture an isolated figure, but a group moving together with patterns that suggested something far more organized. Olympic Peninsula, Washington, July 14, 2025. A trail camera set to follow elk migrations captured something entirely unexpected, a sequence that would challenge every assumption about what truly moves through these forests. As dawn light filtered across a remote meadow, 3 distinct figures emerged from the tree line. The largest stood close to 9 feet tall. Beside it moved a smaller frame, approximately 7 feet in height, with noticeably lighter coloring. But what made this encounter truly extraordinary was the third figure, a childlike form standing no taller than 4 feet. The behavior captured on this footage is absolutely remarkable. The smallest figure doesn't move in formation like the adults. Instead, it wanders freely, occasionally stumbling, and at one point appears to chase something unseen in the tall grass. Meanwhile, the 2 larger figures maintain constant vigilance, their heads continuously scanning the surrounding tree line, with shoulders squared in seemingly protective postures. What happened next sent chills down investigators' spines. When the juvenile wandered too far from the group, the tallest figure made an arm gesture, and the young one immediately returned to their side. The response was instant and natural, exactly what you'd expect from a family unit. The camera captured even more intimate moments that would be impossible to stage. A massive hand, easily as broad as a shovel, briefly rested on the smaller adult's shoulder in what appeared to be a guiding gesture. When the youngest stumbled, both adults immediately rushed to its side, steadying it before the group continued moving. The level of detail visible in this footage is unprecedented. The adults display distinctly different characteristics. The smaller figure has more refined facial features, while the juvenile clearly leans into both adults with the clumsy dependence typical of young offspring. For decades, researchers have debated whether Bigfoot exists as individual creatures. But this Olympic Peninsula footage raises the question: are we witnessing definitive proof that these creatures live in complex family structures, displaying the same protective instincts and social bonds we see in human families? This sequence showed a group moving with unmistakable intent, and days earlier in the Cascades, the presence revealed itself in the opposite way: silent, fragmentary, watching from the tree line, and vanishing before anyone knew it was there. In a lake in the Cascades, Washington State, a lone fisherman set up a tripod to record the big bass he was hauling in, talking through the catch, hyped about its size, the camera rolling for nearly an hour as he worked the line and processed the fish at the water's edge. It was dated March 20th, 2025. Most of the footage is ordinary field video. The angler handling gear, the sun sliding behind ridge lines, water lapping at the shoreline. Then, about 40 minutes in, the frame briefly admits something else, only for a handful of seconds. At the far tree line, between dark trunks and low branches, a pale vertical shape slips into view. A shoulder, the curve of a head, the faint suggestion of an arm moving behind brush. The figure is nearly indistinguishable, half hidden by shadows, seen only as a slow peek between two cedar trunks. Leaves shudder and a low rustle passes through the microphone. Then it moves away. The trees close over the gap, and the long clip continues as if nothing unusual occurred. The fisherman never looks up and never interrupts his narration. He keeps joking about the bass, shows off a few other catches, then signs off and ends the recording. Only later at home does he notice it, freezing the playback on those seconds where something was clearly peering from the forest. He rewinds, slows the frame, and the same brief glimpse repeats. An unmistakable verticality, a slow retreat into the undergrowth. Online reaction was immediate and divided. Many viewers called the clip an obvious stunt, pointing to the angle, the lighting, and the campsite's popularity, with weekend thrill seekers as evidence of a planted costume or staged prank. Others argued that the partial view, the natural motion of foliage, and the lack of dramatic reaction from the fisherman suggested authenticity. Several commenters claiming credentials in wildlife biology and video forensics weighed in, some skeptical, some supportive. Some mentioned that the upload noted there were no clear edits and that the motion blur and sensor noise were consistent with low-light, long-take smartphone footage. For now, the long recording stands mostly as ordinary lake footage, interrupted by a few seconds of something that refuses to be fully seen or fully explained. Visible enough to spark argument, but too indistinct to settle it. At the lake, it lingered only for a moment, half hidden in the trees, more suggestion than proof. At 1:22 a.m. on August 3, 2025, the excavator's mounted security camera captured what investigators would later describe as some of the most unsettling construction site footage ever recorded. The video was grainy, distorted by motion blur, and yet, within its shaky frames, a massive form could be seen crossing into the light. Only fragments were visible, an arm sweeping past the lens, a shoulder wider than the cab door, a leg moving with weight. What stood out most wasn't what was seen, but what couldn't be. The figure never came fully into view, always slipping just beyond clarity. The machine's operator didn't notice at first. The recording shows the excavator subtly shifting, steel joints groaning as if under strain. Then, a shadow pressed against the hydraulic arm, large hands, or what seemed like them, flattening against metal. For several seconds, the excavator rocked visibly on its treads, its cab trembling under immense weight. The camera crackled with static during the contact, obscuring key details. Viewers who studied the footage described brief glints, light catching on thick matted hair, a shape bending unnaturally close to the cab glass, eyeshine flickering in the glare. But no single frame offered confirmation. It was all partial glimpses, blurred edges, and silhouettes that suggested something enormous circling just beyond the limits of certainty. Then came the sound. A deafening metallic crack rang out as the side panel of the excavator caved inward. The recording jolts at that moment, the image smearing into streaks of light before stabilizing again. When it does, the figure is already retreating into the tree line. Work at the site ceased momentarily, but was resumed after a month. The excavator still bears the deep, unexplainable dent. Steel warped inward by force no man could have applied. In Montana, the encounter came from the tree line, a force circling just beyond the reach of floodlights. But in Idaho, it surfaced from the depths, proving these creatures aren't bound to land at all, but command the water with equal mastery. At a depth of 45 feet in Crystal Lake in northern Idaho, underwater cameras positioned during September 12, 2025 for trout population studies suddenly shuddered as a massive shadow entered the field of view. What emerged from the murky depths defied all expectations. Broad shoulders, elongated limbs, and unmistakably bipedal movement in an environment where no known primate should be able to survive. The figure crouched near the lake bottom, yet even in this position clearly stood over 8 feet tall. Its arms swept through the water with wide, perfectly controlled strokes, while its legs adjusted like natural rudders. Nothing about the movement appeared frantic or desperate. Thick hair rippled around the creature's entire frame, dense enough to suggest natural insulation against the frigid mountain water. But here's what left marine biologists absolutely stunned. No air bubbles escaped from the figure, and it showed no signs of respiratory distress. The timestamp revealed an incredible 8 minutes of continuous submersion without once surfacing for air. The creature's behavior underwater was equally remarkable. It bent low, using massive hands to methodically roll rocks and stir up sediment in what appeared to be a search pattern. When those enormous fingers suddenly closed around something, a silver flash was briefly visible, likely a trout. At one point, the figure seemed to hover motionlessly before shifting out of the camera's range. Sediment clouds trailed behind it as it moved through the water with unexpected speed and control. For marine biologists studying the footage and some online speculation, the shock isn't just the sighting itself, it's the incredible adaptability this suggests. A creature traditionally associated with dense forest environments moving through deep water, as if lakes were second nature, raises profound questions about their true capabilities. Local Native American tribes have spoken of water spirits for countless generations, beings that move seamlessly between forest and lake environments. Watching this Crystal Lake footage, those ancient stories suddenly feel less like mythology and more like preserved memory. Could waterways actually serve as hidden transportation routes for these beings? Is this how they've managed to remain undetected for so long, using underwater passages that humans almost never monitor? But if in Idaho it slipped beneath the surface, vanishing into silt and silence, this time in California it tore free of cover, striding onto open asphalt and into human sight. An officer's headlights cut through the empty stretch of road on Highway 101 in Northern California. Then, something massive appeared at the edge of the beam. It wasn't a deer or a bear, just the upper body of a towering, fur-covered figure, frozen in place for the briefest instant before the car passed. The dashcam clip is shaky and blurred, dated January 27, 2025, and lasting less than 10 seconds. But even so, the sheer size and upright stance are impossible to dismiss. According to the officer, he immediately pulled over and turned the cruiser around to aim his spotlight back toward the shoulder where he thought he'd seen it. But the road was empty. No movement, no sound. As evident from his body cam footage, for several minutes, he scanned the forest's edge, expecting eyeshine or some sign of retreat, but nothing appeared. The dash cam recorded his return to the spot and the spotlight cutting into trees that revealed nothing. When the footage was later reviewed, wildlife specialists pointed out that the outline didn't match known animals in the region. Skeptics argued it could be a trick of perspective. shadows warping as the patrol car moved at speed. Cryptozoologists, however, called it one of the most compelling roadside encounters in years, noting the figure's apparent mass and upright posture. Online, the clip ignited immediate debate. Some viewers claimed they could see the swing of an arm as the figure slipped out of frame, while others dismissed it as headlights catching a tree trunk. The officer's calm but unsettled narration on the dashcam audio only added to the tension, convincing many that what he saw was genuine. What remains is only those few seconds of footage, a blurred outline against the headlights, a partial glimpse of something that seemed far too large to explain. Investigators still debate whether it was simply an illusion of speed and shadow, or whether a patrol officer on Highway 101 truly brushed past something we are not meant to understand. On that California highway, it slipped away, leaving only blurred footage and unanswered doubts. September 15, 2025. Deep in the remote wilderness of British Columbia, wildlife photographer Marcus Chen deployed his quadcopter drone for what should have been a routine elk population survey. Instead, his camera captured a fleeting figure moving upright between the cedars, massive, dark, and far too tall to be mistaken for a bear. For only a few seconds, the drone's feed showed its shoulders slipping through the trees before the figure disappeared beneath the canopy. As seen in the footage, Chen adjusted altitude, circling the area in search of whatever he had seen. The drone's camera swept across moss-draped branches and shadowed undergrowth, but the clearing remained empty. Then, just at the edge of the frame, something sudden and fast closed in from the periphery. A heavy object, likely a stone, struck the drone with force. The camera jolted violently, static filled the feed, and within seconds, the aircraft spiraled down. The last frame showed blurred forest rushing upward before the image cut to black. When the footage surfaced online, reaction was immediate. Some viewers insisted the strike confirmed intelligence, arguing no animal throws objects with intent. Others dismissed it as staged, pointing out how easy it is to simulate impact with editing tricks. Chen, however, released the drone's telemetry logs, showing abrupt mechanical failure immediately after the collision. Experts weighed in with cautious observations. A primatologist noted that great apes in the wild occasionally hurl stones at perceived threats, suggesting the act, if genuine, was consistent with higher-level cognition. A drone engineer confirmed the strike was external, not mechanical, but declined to speculate further. Could an unknown species really possess the awareness to target technology so precisely? In the forests of British Columbia, the camera was silenced mid-flight. In Alaska, the storm itself carried out the same erasure, leaving only the suggestion of a figure against the snow. For less than a minute, the weather station's feed in Denali National Park, Alaska, showed a figure moving against the wind on the 7th of January, 2025. Pale hair contrasted faintly against the whiteout, and its outline was unmistakably humanoid. Then a gust swept through, covering the lens in blowing powder and rendering the image useless. When the view cleared seconds later, the space where the figure had been was empty. Online debate was immediate following the day the footage was shared. Some insisted that it showed nothing more than drifting snow distorted by low resolution, while others argued the shape was too consistent, the signature broad shoulders, swinging arms, and a stride that cut through waist-deep drifts without faltering. A handful of commenters claiming to be experts dismissed it as pareidolia, the psychological tendency to perceive familiar patterns, while self-described video analysts countered that the feed bore no signs of editing and carried authentic depth blur from the storm itself. But could a being adapted to these brutal conditions have remained hidden for this long? Believers pointed out that the brevity of the sighting made fakery less likely, noting that hoaxes usually exaggerate and linger. Skeptics replied that its very shortness made it useless as evidence. What both sides found striking was the timing. An automated camera, running in an uninhabited stretch of parkland, catching only seconds of something it was never designed to record. Alaska's camera recorded only a few seconds before the figure moved out of frame, leaving the frozen landscape eerily still. Meanwhile, in Oregon, the campground footage caught something crossing the tree line with a stride too fast, too deliberate, and far too large to ignore. In Oregon, a popular campground near the base of the Cascades had gone quiet for the night, save for the muffled conversation between two campers sharing a tent-side drink. During that 16th night of May this year, one of their phones was already out filming the campfire for a social media post. Then, something shifted at the edge of the tree line. The clip shows less than 10 seconds of motion. A tall shape crosses between two pines, the stride oddly smooth and upright. A faint reflection from the phone's light glints for a moment, then the figure disappears into shadow, leaving only the sound of crackling wood. Almost immediately, online viewers questioned the authenticity. The timing struck many as too convenient. A phone already recording, the subject framed neatly in view, and the sighting taking place in a campground, notorious for Bigfoot tourism. Several commenters pointed out that the proportions looked suspiciously like a man in padded clothing, the exaggerated swing of the arms resembling costume design more than natural movement. And yet, a smaller group argued otherwise. They noted the way the silhouette seemed to maintain balance on uneven ground, its outline bulkier than any ordinary camper. A few self-identified wildlife experts chimed in, claiming that while the footage was poor quality, the shoulder width and gait did not match a human frame. If it was staged, why keep it so brief? Barely long enough to process before it was gone. Skeptics countered that very brevity could be part of the trick. Grainy, dark footage leaves room for suggestion, and hoaxes thrive on what cannot be clearly seen. One alleged video analyst insisted the clip was textbook low-light manipulation, adding that the lack of additional angles or follow-up made it more of a curiosity than evidence. The campers described the moment afterwards as unsettling in its silence. There was no crashing, no obvious animal movement, only the impression of something that appeared just long enough to be noticed before fading back into the trees. The location only fueled debate further. The Cascades have a long history of claimed sightings, drawing tourists, researchers, and hoaxers alike. Some online threads dismiss the video outright as part of that culture, a prank meant to go viral in a familiar setting. Others held on to the idea that hoaxes usually overplay their hand, while this one left only questions. That night, it slipped silently across a campground, barely seen. Now, months later, it crossed a game trail in the dark, moving with the same unnerving purpose before disappearing without a trace. July 6, 2025. Near the tree line of Mount Hood, Oregon, a pair of hunters had set up a trail camera aimed at a game path known for elk movement. At 3:14 a.m., the camera triggered. For just 6 seconds, the infrared feed recorded something upright moving through the frame. The figure passed behind thin branches, its outline clear enough to show long arms hanging lower than expected. The head tilted once toward the camera, and for 2 frames, a single eye reflected white in the infrared. The stride was fast but heavy, each step carrying it further across the shot than a human would cover. The legs bent deeply, almost exaggerated, before straightening again. Then it was gone. Only the empty path remained, brush moving where it had passed. When the footage appeared online, defenders immediately pushed back against claims of fakery. They argued the eye glint couldn't have been staged, pointing out that a taped reflector or flashlight would have bounced light differently under infrared. Others highlighted how the figure's steps didn't match human stride length, noting that each pace covered far too much ground for someone in boots. What stood out most in the debate was the movement itself, smooth, steady, and unwavering, without the awkward pauses people expect when someone is faking. Commenters emphasized how the branches in the foreground distorted the outline just slightly, something they claimed would be nearly impossible to replicate with CGI or a suit. Others pointed out the timing, a random trail camera in the middle of the night catching a figure that doesn't linger, doesn't perform for the lens, and vanishes in seconds. For many, those small details made the clip feel less like a prank and more like an accidental glimpse of something not meant to be seen. It was March 11, 2024, deep in the wet silence of Washington's Olympic National Forest, where fog settles low and radio signals vanish within minutes of the road. That morning, a motion sensor blinked to life. Hours later, a new video appeared online. What it showed would soon divide everyone who watched it. The clip lasted 18 seconds. At first, it showed only static night vision grain, the faint hiss of wind, and a campfire's reflected glow across a plastic tarp. Then, from beyond the creek, a broad, upright shape crossed the frame. Its movements were slow and deliberate, partially obscured by drifting fog, before it turned and disappeared behind a ridge. A heartbeat later, the recording cut to black. Initial reactions were muted, but re-uploads began spreading across Reddit and YouTube within hours. A pattern soon formed in how people labeled the reposts, each one hinting at survival and encounter, rather than simple observation. By the next evening, thousands had watched the clip, yet Ellison himself could not be reached. The silence where his voice should have been grew louder with each unanswered call. Mark Ellison, 50, was a former fire tower ranger who spent 2 decades across the Olympic Peninsula. Known for his precision, he logged every route and weather shift, except, perhaps, the one that mattered most. He lived alone near Forks, where the forest pressed close to his property. After leaving his post, he ran a small channel focused on camping safety and wildlife behavior, field notes more than entertainment. He ignored the folklore around him, documenting only what could be measured. The device he used on his final trip was a compact infrared trail camera that automatically sent every recording to off-site storage. Early March 2024 brought steady rain to the upper Sol Duc drainage. Rain carried the smell of iron from wet bark. Mark Ellison had planned a 3-day trip to test a hybrid solar battery trail camera under dense canopy. He drove from his home in Forks and parked off Highway 101 near Fairholme before hiking in on foot. His plan was simple: set 2 cameras at separate clearings, then return once the data uploaded. Each note he recorded felt routine, until it didn't. GPS tracker and voice recordings showed a routine trip. He checked in at precise intervals, 3:12 p.m., noting barometric pressure, 5:40 p.m., mentioning drizzle. He reached camp before sunset, near a tributary of the Sol Duc River. On day 2, he moved between camera sites, covering nearly 5 miles before returning to camp by late afternoon. His last coordinates placed him a quarter mile from his tent. At 7:52 that evening, Ellison sent a voice note about rising wind and plans to leave early. The message uploaded, then the connection dropped. No further transmissions came after 8 p.m. At 8:41 p.m., his trail camera detected motion. It recorded 18 seconds of night vision footage before uploading to the cloud, the same clip showing a tall shape near the riverbank. Despite the valley's notoriously weak service, short bursts of connection often occurred along ridgelines, which could explain how the file transmitted successfully. Yet the file was perfect, too perfect. The successful upload confirmed equipment was functioning, yet nothing followed. The cameras stayed silent through the night. If the camera was alive, something else in the valley was too. When Ellison failed to return, his sister reported him overdue on March 14th. She had assumed he'd extended the trip because of persistent rain and poor road conditions, but after several unanswered messages, she contacted authorities. Search teams later found his vehicle locked at the trailhead. Teams advanced along the drainage using standard search grids. Near his camp, they found the tent intact, sleeping bag rolled, and cooking gear neatly stacked. His backpack rested under the tarp with 1 day's rations left. The radio was powered off, its batteries removed. Only his phone was missing. The charger remained coiled beside a full battery pack, suggesting he'd taken it with him before vanishing into the forest. A recovered set of boot impressions led away from camp for roughly 40 yards before blending into a patch of wet moss where tracking became unreliable. The path ran parallel to the stream in the same direction as the camera's recorded footage. Was he following something or being led? Searchers found no signs of struggle, no animal traces, and no evidence of sudden runoff or slope collapse. Technicians found Ellison's GPS trail ended abruptly at 8:02 p.m., less than 40 minutes before his camera recorded motion. Investigators blamed either drained batteries or a signal drop in rough terrain. His smartwatch kept transmitting 40 minutes longer, logging movement after the tracker went dark. 2 devices, 2 endpoints, no clear link. The footage drew attention only after his family shared his details online, connecting his name to the viral clip. Search teams expanded their radius but found nothing new. Rain erased traces. Only his gear and a field notebook remained. The last entry dated March 3rd, stopping mid-sentence, pen lifted mid-stroke. Frame-by-frame playback revealed more detail. The object's outline extended nearly 7 feet above ground level when scaled against visible branches. The infrared exposure, usually harsh on warm objects, registered the figure several degrees cooler than its surroundings. That single anomaly became the focus of countless breakdowns. Under normal conditions, a living subject moving through cold air would appear warmer on infrared. The inverse pattern suggested heavy insulation, either natural or layered, capable of masking body heat. But what kind of insulation makes something colder than the forest itself? Colorized conversions circulated across multiple forums, each exaggerating contrast in different ways. One enhanced frame showed a faint reflection on the lower left, 2 consecutive frames in which a smaller irregular shape appeared. Some called it a sensor echo or a lens reflection from fog droplets, while others saw the hint of another crouched figure. No one could agree on the scale, and no one could explain why it moved when nothing else did. Professionals with backgrounds in drone and wildlife imaging weighed in. A group of remote sensing students from Oregon State University attempted to reconstruct the camera's parameters based on the embedded EXIF metadata. Coordinates placed the scene on the south side of the Salt Duke River, roughly 2 miles from the nearest service road. Temperature metadata suggested ambient conditions near 43 degrees Fahrenheit, consistent with Ellison's earlier logs. The camera angle matched one of the test positions Ellison had described to fellow hobbyists weeks earlier. In a comment preserved through cached archives, he mentioned a spot overlooking a narrow stream bend with enough open ground to track deer movement. That detail aligned with the topography visible in the clip, a sloping bank descending into a shallow channel bordered by alder and cedar. He'd mapped it himself. He'd walked that ground before. So why did it look different through the lens? What puzzled analysts was the clean upload timestamp. The file's creation and transfer times showed no signs of delay or corruption. If the device had malfunctioned or been damaged, the upload would have stalled or produced a partial file. Instead, the connection remained steady for the full duration, meaning the camera completed its data queue without interruption. Perfect transmission from a valley known for dead zones. Technicians studying the pixel patterns noticed a faint flicker in the upper right quadrant between frames 241 and 245, less than a quarter of a second in real time. When brightness levels were equalized, a diffused light signature appeared, consistent with a brief reflection from a wet surface or metallic object. It moved counter to the camera's natural light gradient, suggesting an independent source of reflection rather than random interference. Something had caught light where no light should have been. Theories diverged. One camp claimed it was a visual echo from the moving figure. Another insisted it was the partial outline of a second body entering the periphery. A third argued for atmospheric distortion common in humid forest air when illuminated by infrared. No theory could fully explain why the reflected area appeared cooler than both background and subject, reversing expected thermal hierarchy. Independent field photographers recreated similar setups using identical hardware. Most achieved plausible silhouettes using heavy clothing or insulated suits, yet none could replicate the precise temperature inversion shown in the file. The simulated subjects always registered warmer than the forest floor, even when soaked or coated with mud. To match the readings, an object would need either a heat-reflective surface or extremely low core temperature inconsistent with a living human, or it would need to have been there so long it had become part of the cold itself. Satellite imagery confirmed that the area around the recorded coordinates contained deep canopy and water channels known for producing cold air pockets. In such zones, temperature gradients could shift abruptly over short distances. Analysts tried mapping air density changes to explain the flickering outlines, yet the footage's stability argued against wind interference. Every tree in the frame held still. Only the moving figure showed motion distortion, as if everything else knew to stay frozen. As online interest grew, various users claimed to possess clearer copies. Most were filtered versions of the same source, compressed and re-uploaded under misleading titles. The original remained on a cloud server associated with Ellison's account until it was mirrored by multiple websites. A retired wildlife biologist from the Pacific Northwest Research Station reviewed the clip at normal speed and noted proportion ratios unusual for any known animal. The limb length appeared human, but the forward pitch of the torso and restricted arm swing suggested limited shoulder rotation, a trait found in large quadrupeds when forced upright. Combined with the even pacing and apparent mass, the profile did not match typical human gait. It walked like something learning how. Forums filled with motion-tracking overlays. Volunteers marked joint points and stride intervals. The results varied, but shared one oddity. The stride distance measured consistently longer than that of an average adult male. The figure's head never turned toward the camera, despite the obvious illumination shift when it crossed the clearing. It moved as if aware of the light source, but indifferent to it, or as if it had done this before. A few users highlighted the final 3 frames where the shape began to descend behind a slope. The camera registered a brief drop in ambient contrast, followed by a pulse of interference resembling static. Some mistook it for a system error, but file diagnostics confirmed intentional cutoff. The device terminated recording precisely at the standard 18-second mark, meaning the motion trigger had completed its cycle rather than failed. It ended exactly when it was supposed to. Nothing malfunctioned, nothing broke. It simply stopped watching. When investigators later cross-checked the metadata with official survey maps, the coordinates aligned with a ridge overlooking a narrow tributary of the Sol Duc River. The distance to the nearest access point measured just over 2 miles, accessible only by foot and far from campsites. Despite meticulous analysis, no consensus emerged. To some, the video showed a hoax performed with precision equipment. To others, it was a rare example of an unknown presence moving through one of the most isolated valleys in the region. The only certainty came from the data itself. The camera functioned exactly as designed, recorded at stable temperature and time, and transmitted the file without error. But certainty isn't the same as truth. By the second week after the leak, breakdown threads dominated discussion boards. Digital forensics groups produced papers describing possible causes, ranging from double exposure to sensor misread. Yet each hypothesis left one constant unexplained: the secondary reflection that appeared in those 2 brief frames. It was there, unmistakable, yet no one could say what it was or why it moved opposite the main subject. Some things defy focus no matter how many times you replay them. When search teams reached the coordinates tied to the footage, the clearing matched every contour visible in the clip: the slope, the stream bend, even the distinctive split trunk on the left side of the frame, all present. But the primary trail camera that had recorded the event was gone. Only its nylon mounting strap and a length of solar wire remained, both ends frayed but not cut. The ground beneath the tree showed no signs of struggle, only a compressed patch of soil where the camera housing should have rested. Something had taken it gently. 200 yards from the site, Ellison's backup camera remained active. It captured no visuals, only 8 seconds of heavy impacts, a low hum, then static at 8:42 p.m., 1 minute after the main clip. Analysts noted an electromagnetic-type spike, as if something nearby generated interference. His vehicle sat untouched at the Fairholme trailhead, keys gone but supplies intact. Hours after the footage spread, forensic users discovered a second save at 9:03 p.m., over 20 minutes after all devices went dark. Service in the valley was poor, yet deliberate access was clear. The file had been reopened. The question was, by whom? This discrepancy became the first tangible contradiction in the case. If Ellison had left camp before 8 p.m. and the footage auto-uploaded at 8:41, who interacted with the file at 9:03? Investigators tested the hypothesis of an automated server sync, but logs from the manufacturer's database showed no queued retries or firmware updates at that time. Whatever process modified the file had occurred locally, not through routine background operations. Further inspection revealed that the 9:03 record shared the same checksum as the original, ruling out content alteration. The change involved metadata only, consistent with a resave command triggered when a user previews or reopens the file, as if someone had been reviewing what they just recorded. That small gap, 22 minutes between upload and modification, became the focal point for both official investigators and online sleuths. Some analysts noted that minor server clock drift or timestamp desynchronization could technically account for the discrepancy, though the lack of corresponding network activity kept the anomaly under scrutiny. Searchers on the ground had found no footprints beyond the creek, no equipment suggesting Ellison retrieved the camera himself, and no evidence of wildlife interference capable of pressing buttons or powering devices. Yet the file's behavior implied human interaction, or something that understood how humans interact. Forums began speculating that someone else had been in the area, possibly another hiker or a passerby who found the camera and triggered a manual upload while checking its contents. But weather records showed heavy rain moving through the region that night, reducing visibility and making travel off established routes unlikely. Rangers also confirmed no other camping permits had been issued within a 5-mile radius during that period. No one else should have been there. So who touched the camera at 9:03? 3 nights after the original clip spread, a second version surfaced on a small video mirror under an unverified account. The username matched none of Ellison's, yet the description claimed it was a restored copy from the trail camera's SD card. Uploaded just after midnight on March 14th, between official searches and the final volunteer sweep, it seemed deliberately timed. The checksum differed slightly, indicating a new encode. This version ran 5 seconds longer. Amid static and interference, a faint shape appeared, elongated, bent, dragging something downslope. The feed ended in a smear of noise and blackout. 5 seconds that changed everything. Video forensic groups analyzed the new clip and found no edits. Only breaks typical of an interrupted upload resumed under weak signal. The file acted as if a frozen transfer had later continued from cached data, suggesting the added segment always existed but failed to send the first time. The camera had seen more than anyone realized. Its block-based system could store incomplete frames for later upload, yet no one could explain how those missing packets resurfaced 3 days later, or who held the physical card needed to retrieve them. By then, search teams had confirmed one fact: the primary camera was gone. Compression analysis deepened the puzzle. The static at the start of the added sequence displayed a symmetrical frequency band, evidence of re-encoding, not external noise. Experts described it as a signature left when damaged frames are rebuilt by automated correction software. The recovered images were cleaner than they should have been, almost too intact for a device that had supposedly gone offline. Someone had worked to restore them. But why? Viewers who enhanced the footage noticed a series of faint flickers along the right edge, forming a repeating pattern consistent with a swinging light source. When motion tracked, the rhythm aligned closely with a bipedal gait, alternating at just under 2 strides per second. The dragging form appeared attached or pulled, its heat signature fading unevenly as the larger shape moved downslope. Something was being carried or taken. Timing comparisons soon connected the recovered segment to another dataset, Ellison's smartwatch telemetry extracted from cloud backup. His device had been configured to sync periodically through a low-bandwidth satellite relay, preserving minute-level heart rate logs even after local signal loss. The data showed a sudden elevation at 8:44 p.m., climbing rapidly for less than 2 minutes before flatlining at 8:46. The moment of peak signal loss overlapped exactly with the extended portion of the new video. His heart had stopped at the exact moment the extra footage ended. To investigators, the correlation was circumstantial, but for online researchers, it became a turning point. The idea that the extra footage aligned with Ellison's last recorded heartbeat implied both events were captured within the same minute. The footage didn't just show what happened, it showed when he stopped running. Within 24 hours of its posting, the second file was removed from the original site for privacy concerns, but duplicates spread immediately across mirror channels. Each re-upload introduced new compression errors, yet the defining sequence, the faint figure dragging weight behind the ridge, remained visible enough to sustain argument. Whether it depicted corrupted pixels or something tangible, its timing and method of appearance transformed the case from an isolated disappearance into a digital mystery. The recovery team moved through the Sol Duke drainage with handheld thermal scanners, mapping every contour of the floodplain. On the sixth day, near a narrowing of the creek, they found an object half buried in mud beneath a fallen branch. It was Ellison's smartwatch, screen cracked, band torn, but GPS module intact. Data extracted from the watch showed a sudden burst of motion beginning at 8:43 p.m., with his heart rate spiking at 8:44 as he covered roughly 200 feet in under a minute before signals stopped. The elevation graph indicated a brief incline, then descent toward the water. Analysts estimated that he had covered the distance in less than 40 seconds before the signal flatlined. 40 seconds of speed, then nothing. Around the same area, investigators documented 2 sets of impressions in the soft soil. One matched standard hiking boots consistent with Ellison's model, size 11. The other appeared parallel, larger, broader, and bare. The second track measured nearly 14 inches from heel to toe, but the shape was uneven, with pressure points unlike a human arch. The prints extended for 3 paces before fading where the mud thinned near gravel. Wildlife biologists from the Department of Fish and Wildlife later examined plaster casts and noted that a bear could produce similar depth under rearing posture. But the stride length, over 5 feet, did not match known locomotion patterns. Biologists noted that while bears can rear briefly, sustained pacing at that stride length was improbable. The impressions showed neither a full quadrupedal gait nor a consistent upright stance, but something intermediate, something that walked beside him, matching him step for step. Despite growing speculation, law enforcement issued no public statements. Search logs made no mention of recovering the missing SD card. Officially, the investigation categorized all unrecovered equipment as having undetermined disposition. By mid-March, the internet divided into factions. One group advanced what they called the human theory, the belief that Ellison's disappearance resulted from a staged scare gone wrong. They argued that another camper or filmmaker had planned a viral prank, misjudged conditions, and triggered a real emergency. But if it was staged, why did the footprints continue past the frame? Opposing them were proponents of the biological theory who treated the event as an authentic encounter with an unidentified species. They cited the temperature inversions in the original file and the stride spacing at the creek as evidence of a large biped adapted for stealth in cold environments. And no one could say who moved the file at 9:03. A third camp, labeled by moderators as the staged upload theory, took a different approach. They suggested that Ellison himself had captured legitimate wildlife footage, but someone else later manipulated or recontextualized it. The 9:03 p.m. modification, they claimed, marked an external actor accessing his account after the fact. These competing narratives generated a wave of open-source data projects. One group of independent analysts pulled IP logs from Mirror archives and discovered an address embedded in the header of the second upload. The IP traced not to Washington, but to a satellite modem registered in Idaho. When cross-referenced with commercial leasing databases, the modem's serial number appeared in a rental invoice issued to a forestry contractor operating in Olympic National Forest earlier that year. The company had returned the unit in January, weeks before Ellison's trip, a recycled connection from equipment that shouldn't have been active. But it was. That discovery reignited claims that someone with professional field access had handled the footage after his disappearance. Digital forensics experts reviewing the trail camera's communication protocol agreed that a remote connection could have initiated upload from any device paired to its cloud credentials. It was plausible, though improbable, that a technician testing residual logins from a recycled modem could have triggered a resync without knowing its content. Or someone knew exactly what they were looking for. While online debates deepened, a new development surfaced in late March. A regional newspaper received an anonymous message from someone claiming to possess unlisted footage from the same night. The sender described being a drone hobbyist testing night sensors several miles south of the Salt Duke drainage. Attached metadata placed the flight path within overlapping airspace at 8:44 p.m., 2 minutes before Ellison's smartwatch signal ended. When the outlet viewed the clip, it showed a faint thermal flare above the canopy, followed by a sudden cold patch moving diagonally through the frame. At 8:44, a new light cut across the canopy. Not bright, cold. There were no visible lights or reflective markers, no indication of human presence. Analysts who later examined screenshots described the object as elongated and vertical, emitting less heat than its surroundings, as if covered in moisture or dense material. A shape moved against the gradient, vertical, silent. The drone's coordinates intersected within roughly 150 feet of Ellison's final smartwatch GPS ping, accounting for expected GPS drift under dense canopy. Within a day of publication, the file vanished. The hosting site replaced the link with a message stating it had been removed for privacy violation. Attempts to verify ownership failed. The account used to upload the footage was deleted, and the original drone operator never came forward. The newspaper printed a brief correction stating that they could not confirm the clip's authenticity. Still, enough viewers had archived it to maintain discussion. The alignment of timestamps, trail camera at 8:41, drone at 8:44, smartwatch at 8:46, formed a triangular chronology that no one could dismiss. 3 devices, 3 timestamps, and nothing after. By early April, official search efforts concluded. Reports described weather degradation, reduced visibility, and low likelihood of recovery. Official reports later summarized 3 confirmed data points, each drawn from separate devices. The trail camera upload at 8:41 p.m., the smartwatch cessation at 8:46 p.m., and the drone telemetry anomaly logged at 8:44 p.m. Beyond those times, every trace ended. There were no confirmed sightings, no physical remains, and no identified suspects. Just silence where a man used to be. When spring arrived, the online focus shifted from search coordination to retrospective analysis. A few persistent archivists built composite maps linking every timestamp and coordinate into an interactive model. The overlap revealed a convergence zone less than 2 acres wide, dense forest floor bordered by drainage slopes, where line of sight dropped abruptly. It was the same valley Ellison had documented years earlier while mapping fire breaks. He'd walked that ground 100 times. But had something else been walking it longer? In June, another anomaly drew attention. Users tracking residual logins to Ellison's accounts noted new activity. Someone had accessed his long-abandoned video page from a masked IP routed through Oregon. The login session lasted less than 10 minutes, but resulted in deletion of all previous uploads except one titled Night Vision Test Number 2. Its upload timestamp predated the disappearance by exactly 2 minutes. Why leave only that one? The surviving clip, less than 10 seconds long, depicted a simple setup, Ellison adjusting the trail camera while testing focus. In the final frame, his reflection appeared faintly on the lens housing. Behind him, deeper in the trees, a dim outline curved across the periphery, slightly delayed in movement, as though the reflection and the object behind it were out of sync. The detail went unnoticed for months, until frame-stabilized copies circulated through forums. When slowed, the offset became clearer. Ellison's arm lowered first, but the faint silhouette of the same motion lingered a half-beat longer before fading, as if something had been learning how to mirror him and hadn't quite perfected the timing. Investigators declined to comment on the reactivation of his account. The provider confirmed only that the deletion and upload records were genuine and originated from correct credentials. Forensic analysts couldn't determine whether the login came from recovered hardware or a reused credential on another machine, leaving the source of access unresolved. Someone still had his passwords. Someone was still watching his work. By July, the case was formally suspended. The forest had taken everything back. Only the footage remained, clear, silent, watching. The three remaining points, the camera, drone, and watch, formed the last measurable chain in a story without closure. Local news moved on, and Moss reclaimed the search site. Online, only fragments survived, mirrored clips, conflicting diagrams, fading threads of speculation. The last trace of Mark Ellison came from a device built to record what passed before it, not what lingered behind. Everything after that was interpretation, pixels, reflections, and data gaps where a person should have been. Maybe something else had been watching him. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.